Вперед.
Так, кто мне будет заехать? Ай, ну, сломай! Это вот это. Ну, да, нельзя.
Да?
Сломай.
Ну ладно, ладно. Влад, иди сюда.
The first steps on the way of the warrior started in ancient Russia from one's earliest years. At the age of 3, young boys participated in a ceremony of cutting their hair. Their hair was cut, they saddled a horse, and they were presented with a belt and sword. This ceremony included a religious blessing, and a great family celebration and feast took place with many guests. Martial arts training started at the age of 7, accompanied by their fathers and elder brothers, and formal training began at age 12.
Движение, глаза закрыты.
Начинать?
Естественно, да. Да, движение, спокойное.
Тут палок нету?
Пока нету.
А будут?
Будут, конечно. Вы должны реагировать.
Сначала хотела стать казаком. Папа решил меня обучить вообще, в принципе, владеть шашкой.
At first, I wanted to be a Cossack. My dad decided to teach me to master the shashka, but it didn't work out, and I couldn't do the techniques. Then he decided to send me to a martial arts school. He found this school, and now I'm attending it. If I don't study here, I won't master the shashka, and I will never become a Cossack.
Пониже опускайся, пониже. Да, молодцы, молодцы. Давай, Данила, думай. Думай, на носочки. Дыхание. Давай, молодец, старайся.
The training is over, but Danil doesn't hurry to leave the gym. He has some questions for his instructor, and he wants to train a bit more. During the class, the instructor's attention is drawn towards all of his students, whereas after class, there's a chance to ask questions and an opportunity to continue learning. In 2001 and 2002, leaders and specialists in combat and physical education at the Ministry of Justice of the Russian Federation showed an interest in implementing the Russian martial art Systema into the training curriculum at the Ministry of Justice and its affiliated institutions. A group of experts gathered to assess its efficiency and applicability. This special group included senior executives from various government agencies, famous athletes, and teachers from the State Physical Education Academy. As a result of their assessment, the official, applied, sport, patriotic, and health aspects of the Russian martial arts Systema were defined. In 2003, the organization Russian Martial Arts Systema was officially registered. It was called Systema for short. Everyone is able to find what they are seeking within Systema. Recovery or some other area of improvement. There's something for everyone. There are some people who are interested in improving their vision. One student had marked problems with his eyes, and he began practicing Systema. Now he doesn't even wear glasses. He simply forgot about it. His vision is drastically improved. In Systema, it's essential to work on yourself. There are some people that feel you can just take a pill or something like that. But the reality is, in Systema, we have to come back to ourselves. Schools of the Russian martial arts Systema possess a wide variety of students: children, adults, people with disabilities, and active sportsmen looking to improve their skills. So the composition differs in terms of age and level of mastery. Training classes take place at different times, and there are many instructors who teach. Alexander Andreychenkov trains men. It's difficult to believe, but he's 52 years old and is registered as a fully disabled person.
Антон, все думает, что я вписываться буду. А мне лениво. Мне лениво. А потом мне лениво.
What's the difference between this kind of training and sports? People who practice sports experience pain and injury, and Systema training leads to health improvement. For example, I don't have an Achilles tendon in my right foot, but a prosthetic appliance. I had an electrical injury, 10,000 volt injury, after which I was hospitalized for half a year. And now, as you can see, because of Systema, look, our training appears easy because there are no confrontations, as in boxing or fighting. All of the movements that you see follow concise tangents and trajectories, like a dance. But to follow a precise trajectory and to make concise movements, one has to practice for many years. It's like the anecdote about an artist who worked at the Arbor. A passerby walked by and saw the artist and said, "Your pictures are beautiful. Could you draw my portrait, please?" "Of course." "How much does it cost?" 10,000 rubles. Okay. After 3 minutes, the portrait was finished. The passerby was astonished. He asked, "How come 3 minutes cost 10,000 rubles?" The painter answered, 3 minutes and 33 years of painting.
Все время точно выбирайте направление. Направление точно, чтобы не давать опору. И ставить его, да, в неудобное положение. То есть мы пока не столько бьем, сколько его расшатываем. Выводим из равновесия.
The emperor of Byzantium, Mavriki, who lived in the 6th century, wrote in the military tactics textbook Strategon, Slavic tribes are similar in their lifestyle, morals, and love of freedom. They can't be turned into slaves or driven into bondage. They are large in number, strong, and easily withstand heat, cold, isolation, and hunger. They like to fight their enemies in dense forests, gorges, and steep inclines. They use ambushes successfully. They also make sudden sneak attacks, inventing different methods by day and night. If surprised by an enemy's sudden attack, they're able to dive into the deep water. They use special reeds, hollowed out from the inside, and put them into their mouths. The reeds lie just under the water's surface, and the warriors lie on the river's bottom and breathe through them. They can do this for hours at a time, and it's difficult to detect them or know where they are.
И это они могут проделывать в течение многих часов, так что совершенно нельзя догадаться об их присутствии.
It sounds like a story from ancient history, but this was actually a survival method used by the father of Russia's president, Vladimir Spiridonovich Putin, who was a scout during the Second World War. His unit had been carrying out diversions at the German front. They were betrayed and surrounded and decided to escape one by one. Vladimir Spiridonovich went across the swamp. When he heard the sound of German dogs, he slipped into the water up to his head and continued breathing using the reed. The Germans passed him by and he was undetected.
Паренек у нас один приезжал.
There was one guy who came to us who was able to hold his breath for 7 minutes. He's a scuba diver. After attending a Systema seminar, which was guided by Mikhail Rybko, he went back home and sent us a message that he was able to hold his breath for up to 9 minutes. If it's not the mistake of the timer, he wrote, Systema works. Well, then he tried his breath holding a couple more times and said, okay, I guess the timer doesn't lie. Breathing. Systema training puts an emphasis on breathing. It's one of its foremost emphases. It's not easy to breathe properly, and it's tenfold more difficult to breathe properly while fighting. However, correct breathing provides optimal circumstances and lets a person deal with strenuous physiologic load and confrontation. The main principle is sufficiency, using the correct amount of oxygen for every action. In a very basic way, when you're inactive, you don't need much oxygen. But if you run or are active, you need more, and then your rate of breathing increases. And if we have a difficult situation, the same. You take one step breathing in and another step breathing out. Each person is different physically and mentally, so he has to choose accordingly. It's because breathing releases our psyche from tension.
Дыхание, оно еще и психику освобождает от напряжения.
Я ударяю, а ты вот так все тело расслабляй, а кулак держи.
Mikhail Vasilyevich Rybko is the founder of Systema. Systema has its roots in ancient Russian martial arts from the period when Russia was called Holy Russia or Holy Rus. And that holiness was not merely that all of its citizens had become righteous men or saints, but rather the idea that the ideal of the Russian people's life was to follow the way of Christ. As the basis of Systema's breathing and the basis of Christian life is praying, breathing and praying couldn't continue in isolation, separated from each other. Let's recall the words of the Psalm of David. Let every breath praise the Lord. Prayer exists for each moment. This is the essence of the Orthodox Army. Every baptized person is called a warrior of Christ. And if he or she follows God's commandments, they will understand everything. They won't have any problem in their life. Should it be referred to breathing somehow? Breathe in, that's God. Breathe out, have mercy on me.
Я попал в лобовое столкновение, в аварию.
My wife and I were in a car accident, a head-on collision. Thanks to proper breathing, I survived this accident. I began Systema training at that time with Mikhail Vasilyevich. I couldn't breathe well. Little by little, we started to breathe and pray. I recovered, and later there were no residual injuries. My car was totally destroyed, with no chance of repair, but we were alive. Now we're at the chapel of the saint, bishop, and miracle worker Losov from Belgorod. This chapel was built by Mikhail Vasilyevich and his followers. There's a great number of icons here. There are many icons with relics. This one is of Bishop Losov. There's an icon here from the new martyr Fadye from Tver. Many icons are from other saints, from places like Jerusalem and Athos. Monastic elders from the holy mountain, Athos, presented many icons of the Mother of God. There's also an icon of the saints from Kiev-Pechersky Monastery. All of these icons are blessing Mikhail Vasilyevich for his great work and will further lead to the development of young, religious, patriotic souls.
И молодежи, и людей в православном патриотическом духе.
From the beginning of ancient Russia, Russia's adopted Christianity from Byzantium. It was like a precious gift. Soon it was understood that it needed to be protected. The history of Russia is a history of a besieged fortress, the center of which is the cathedral with bells. If you look at a map of ancient Russian towns and cities, you'll see churches in the center. In the western towns and cities, the church would rather be located in one of the corner towers, but in Russia that wasn't the case. The church had to be located in the center of the fortress. It was the heart of the fortress, and while that heart was still beating, the battle wouldn't stop. When the town was surrounded by enemies, citizens received blessings in the temple day and night. They rang the bells and carried icons and relics to the warriors to help them and to give them strength. In 1581, large forces headed by Stefan Batory invaded Russian territory. While the main forces were laying siege to Pskov, another detachment surrounded Pskovo-Pechersky Monastery. When invaders made a break in the wall and rushed inside, monks brought an icon of the Madonna to the breach. While one group of defenders was fighting near the breach, the other one prayed. It must be said, everybody prayed. Some of the warriors just crossed themselves, and others killed enemies with their swords. The reporter and Roman Catholic priest at that time, Jan Petrovsky, wrote about what had happened. The Germans were short of luck. There were 2 combat assaults in Pechora, and neither was successful. They managed to only make 1 breach in the town's wall. Some said that that place was charmed, whereas others said it was a holy place. In any case, the monks who accomplish such feats are worthy of respect. Grottos where monks and warriors are buried are holy places in the Pskovo-Pechersky monastery. Military feats have always been honored and considered the same as monks' feats.
Александр Суворов очень-очень хорошо сказал.
Alexander Suvorov said about Russian warriors, "Every warrior is brave and high-spirited, and the Russian army has morality and virtue." That's the main idea. True masters are very attentive to morals, and that's the most important thing, spiritual teaching. That is why Russian warriors are decent persons, and at the same time, they are those who can sacrifice their lives for their fellow Christians' sake. So we see Jesus' commandments being upheld. Serve God, the people, and the motherland. Mikhail Vasilievich knows what it means to serve God, the people, and the motherland. He served many years in war. He served in the war in Yugoslavia and in the wars in the North Caucasus. Mikhail Vasilievich is a recipient of multiple awards and decorations. One of the highest and most cherished such war decorations is the Medal for Bravery, which Mikhail Vasilievich received in 1996. He was an officer of SOBR, a special rapid response unit founded in the Ministry of Internal Affairs, which played a large role in saving the Russian state. SOBR put a stop to criminal activity in the 1990s and won honor and fame during the years of the Chechen Wars, stopping multiple terror attacks. In truth, all of those conflicts cost many lives. In 1996, SOBR and other special forces units surrounded the Pervomaisk settlement, where the terrorists under Raduyev were prepared to fight. A friend of Mikhail Vasilievich, a hero of Russia, Andrei Krestyanov, died in this fight, and his commander, Anatoly Rybnikov, was injured.
Русским и не только русским, а вот славянам присуща.
Russian and Slavic people share the inherent trait of love. They cannot live without it because love is God. It's Christianity. This Christian way helps a lot. When you're in combat during the mission, you don't think about Marx or Engels. You just turn to God, especially when your enemies are shooting at you. I was injured at the beginning of the combat. Mikhail was dragging out injured soldiers. He stayed there. I was driven to a hospital for surgery. I had a serious concussion and suffered spinal cord trauma. He managed to organize the evacuation of all of the wounded soldiers and to coordinate the aeromedical evacuation. It was very difficult. All of the injured were transported quickly to hospitals. He took it upon himself to manage the entire evacuation, and though there were many generals and captains of highly distinguished rank, they didn't act when he did. We thank him for that. The main criteria of selection at SOBR is reliability, and those supermen from movies who battle against 100 men and win single-handedly, these people don't make it into SOBR. The soldiers of SOBR and Spetsnaz units have to be reliable, balanced, and without a sense of doubt. Mikhail is an even-tempered, calm, balanced, competent officer, and I would follow him on any mission.
Один на один с офицером.
None of the Russian or German cameramen during World War II were able to film hand-to-hand fighting. Not a single one of them. They couldn't continue. They were overwhelmed by the horror and they just threw their cameras down and joined the fighting. It's like a state of being. It's complicated. It's sort of like a state of being, a condition.
Мне постоянно снится, что у меня патроны кончаются, пружина лопнула, не перезаряжается. То есть, вот у меня было так.
I have a recurring dream in which I'm running and being shot at. My machine gun won't reload. If my dreams involve any action, it always involves a mission. That's the condition. It can't be explained or spoken about. So it's necessary to come out of this condition psychologically. Only in the church is it possible to heal through confession and communion. Repentance, it can help.
Вопрос покаяния, он может помочь.
Аллах смотрит на наш иман. Если у нас будет иман очень крепкий, братья, Аллах нам все даст.
Терроризм в переводе с латинского – это страх.
In Latin, terrorism means fear. Fear is leverage used by terrorists to turn the world and people's lives upside down. Overcoming fear and the skill to control it is one of the key points of Mikhail Rybko's system.
Человек должен остаться человеком, и на войне тоже.
A human must stay human, even in war. If a soldier begins to imagine how he will kill people and savor it, that's it. He has to be sent back. It's a sign of psychological trauma. He won't be able to stay alive.
То есть он не сможет выжить в ситуации.
In any army, at first, a person should be trained how to survive, and only after that, how to complete a mission. If a soldier is unable to survive, there's no point whatsoever. That's why it's important to train the body and the mind to survive a knife attack, to learn how to defend oneself so that one won't be killed. And only then will you be able to do something. We have to work with many different partners in different ways. Some partners are tense, some partners are relaxed. Some are fast, some are slow. Some are old, some are young. And in the end, we not only work with the partner, but we have to work with ourselves. If you apply a knife to a body that's tense, the knife will penetrate. But if that body is relaxed, the knife is more likely to only cut it.
And then you close the eyes. And do the same thing.
И тогда вы наработаете чувствительность на нож. Вот у меня сегодня, не сегодня.
There's a woman who trains in the Saturday classes who was attacked by 3 armed men. They tortured her for money. They cut her hand with a knife. But she trains at Systema and was able to use her training to remain calm. Some criminals broke into Valentina's house around 10 p.m. at night through the window when she was home alone. She tried to defend herself, but was overwhelmed. They threw her down on the floor and started to pin her arms. I understood that it was better to stay calm, and I tried to relax my body. The knife slipped from their hands. They smashed me in the face. I turned my head slightly. They pressed and strangled me, demanding money. I said that I would give it to them. I had a little bit kept separately. They then unleashed my hands. The criminals took money and began to ask for more. They threatened to cut off my fingers one by one. And of course, I was terrified. But when I saw the criminals' trembling hands with the knife in them, I calmed down a bit. I put my head down on my shoulder as if I were passing out, and they took the kitchen knife and started to cut my thumb. I totally relaxed my body. Then my hands started bleeding, but I didn't feel much pain. Then they realized I wasn't going to tell them anything, and they threw me on the floor again and started to pin me. I recalled what I had practiced in Systema. I tensed my muscles as a tense body gets bigger, and so I tried to draw my hands apart wider. They tied my hands with sticky tape, tied my legs up harder. They also tied together my hands and legs, and I found myself lying on the floor. The criminals left as suddenly as they had appeared, but death was still a possibility. Nobody was due to come home for a while. Her crooked body began to grow numb. She thought about how to save her life. I remembered how we in class, there were 10 of us, grabbed our teacher, and he moved in such a way that he was able to escape. So I began to make similar circular movements softly, and in a few minutes, I was able to free my hands. I truly appreciate Systema training and the teachers who trained me, because thanks to them, I was able to save my life. Valentina goes to Systema training and she laughs all along the way. She says that earlier she couldn't do rolls, and now she does them with ease. Life has changed. I drive and I smile. After the training, I'm always in a good mood. It lasts all week. We always look forward to next Saturday when we'll train again. We all became friends. Today I invited some girls to my dacha for a barbecue, and everyone accepted with glee. In the summer of 1774, when the Cossacks were at war on all fronts against the Turks, the Cossack village Naurskaya was besieged by a mountain tribe. The elderly and the women with children, all festively dressed, were in church. When they heard the first shots, the women charged out and, armed with pitchforks, hooks, and scythes, began to hold off the attack. They poured boiled water and cabbage soup on their enemies' heads. The women fired guns and cannons, and one of them cut off an enemy's head with a scythe while he was climbing the wall, and she took his gun and sword. The fighting continued for 12 hours, and all of the attacks were staved off, and at dawn the invaders began to drop back. Actually, as Mikhail Vasilyevich stated, you have to be balanced and have the same emotional feeling towards your enemy in battle as you feel when you cook your breakfast. I appreciate these words and often repeat them to my students. Every now and then we talk about this. It's important not to feel hatred. In our Russian spirit, there has never been hate, not even towards our enemies and invaders. Russians have always defended themselves and fought to the death. The thing is that the Russian spirit is righteous, and not only in fairy tales. It's also proven by our actions. This is Vadim Dobrin. His destiny brought him to South Africa. He's a stunt coordinator with a film studio there. He grew up in a military family, graduated from Suvorov High School, and served as a paratrooper. He has 6 black belts in different martial arts. Later, after he had already left the Soviet Union, he found out about Systema. As the saying goes, better late than never. While in Africa, Vadim happened to be in a combat zone where he had to participate in hand-to-hand combat. And more than once, he thanked God for Systema. I went there as an instructor and counselor, but in fact, at times, I had to train local soldiers and be in charge. I work with different units, and I even participated at times in combat. Did Systema help you? If I didn't have Systema in my life, I wouldn't be alive now. I swear to it.
Reputation for cheese, that's the role of a boss. So amazing to see black baguettes in my watch.
Johannesburg is considered to have the highest crime rate in the world. When Vadim arrived, he was surprised by the rampant violence. Criminals attempted to rob him and steal his car on several occasions. As his English was only so-so, his Systema language was easier to understand for the locals. My English wasn't good, so it was difficult to solve such problems with words. Now, I guess I've improved. But then, I had to defend myself in all sorts of confrontations, against weapons and against multiple attackers. So, did they leave you alone? Sometimes. Sometimes they just ran away. Sometimes they fell down. Besides working at a film studio, Vadim teaches Systema to all comers at the premises of Sergius of Radonezh Orthodox Church, not only Russians, but also people of other nationalities. They come to learn self-protection, but then they begin to understand that Systema is not only the skill of striking back. Vadim experienced that firsthand. That's really so. When I joined Systema, I got a sense of life. When you wake up in the morning, there's another sense of the world, in a different sense towards people. Because if you have no fear, if you stop being uptight or taking notice of little things, but rather focus on the main issues, you become quite different at home, at work, and in your training.
Расплескалась синева, расплескалась, по петлицам разлилась, по погонам. Я хочу, чтоб наша жизнь продолжалась по суровым, по десантным законам. Я хочу, чтоб наша жизнь продолжалась по гвардейским, по десантным законам.
Systema is really alive. It's always very difficult to work with something living because it changes. As a human, when you manage one holder technique and then another one and then a third one, you get a sense of a base. But in Systema, there's continual change. You see something new, then something else, so you have to keep learning. What on earth is that? Many people like it, but many don't. Vladimir Vasilyev is second in Systema after Mikhail Rybko. He lives in Canada and gives seminars all over the world. This seminar is in Hamburg, Germany. 2 days before, Vasilyev gave a similar seminar in Paris. Systema spread beyond Russia and won the hearts of thousands of people worldwide. This is such a different way of martial art understanding. It can make your head spin. The more I practice Systema, the more I realize that Mikhail is a great master. Vasilyev began practicing martial arts at boxing classes. Then he learned karate and was successful in competition. When he heard about Systema, he came to Rybko and began a year-long apprenticeship. He went to Canada at the beginning of the 1990s to try to make money out of putting together electrical accessories. He didn't think about teaching Systema, but one day his colleagues found out that Vasilyev practiced some unknown Russian martial art, and they invited him to one of the gyms in Toronto. So in other words, it's important to know how to take hits. Yes, and not that much physically, but rather psychologically. There's so much fear inside, and fear holds us back. It's a restraint. And this restraint causes a shortage of movement in the body. The body should be soft. The knowledge and ability to take strikes is another foundation of Systema. Mikhail explains that a human being is not a plank or a board where different organs are laid out. A human is an integral system, and if when one is struck, a person moves in the right direction according to his flexibility, the power of the strike can be dissipated. He will handle it. The skill of taking strikes amazes other martial arts professionals, but masters teach this step by step. A beginner will never be struck hard, and teachers will try not to hurt him. Look, if I throw my hand around, it means I show you where to go. I don't want to be egoistic. The main sin is pride, and when you work with a person, sometimes it comes. There's a wish to hurt him, just to show what a heavy hitter you are. But it stops you, and then you don't grow as a Christian if you believe in God. The first rule for me is not to hurt the other person. In other words, you do good to people, and they feel that. Then they say, this is a different attitude. People whom I teach come and say that they want to be baptized. They're Canadians, Asians, Indians, and people of color. They say, I don't need something. I just need to go and get baptized. I have about 50 godsons around the world. A couple of Germans went here to be baptized too. Yes, I'm Orthodox. I was Catholic before. I've been practicing Systema since 2002. I felt early on that it helped me to manage stress and different problems in relationships to people and situations. When I learned that the heart of Systema is orthodoxy, I started to think about it. I've pondered it for 5 years. I started to attend Russian Orthodox services here in Hamburg, and I read books translated into German. I felt that the divine touched my soul, and I found answers to questions in those books. That changed my heart, so I decided to become an Orthodox Christian. There are hundreds of such cases of people accepting orthodoxy via Systema. Mikhail Rybko has more than 100 godsons around the world, and he's helped build and open Orthodox churches. One of these is the Church of St. Bishop Nikolai, which is located in the Prosecutor General's Office of Russia. It was inaugurated in 2007. And the first prior of this church was Father Alexander.
Все достаточно плодотворное сотрудничество с Генеральной прокуратурой получилось вот.
This fruitful and efficient partnership with the General Procuracy worked out with the help of Mikhail Rybko. If not for him, nothing would get done. He promoted it from the beginning. What is this church for? Serious tasks are assigned to the Procuracy: fighting corruption and setting up law enforcement authorities' work and control. These are very important tasks, and they demand total engagement. There's a serious risk of those involved in such tasks of getting burned out. And here, in this church, they can pray and ask the Holy Mother for protection and God for help. That's why Yuri Chaika, the general prosecutor, advocated for the priesthood and believers for a chapel here and met their requests.
И Пресвятой Богородицы, и святых, и у Господа попросить помощи. Поэтому Юрий Яковлевич пошел навстречу духовенству и православным людям, общине, которые попросили его, чтобы еженедельно были здесь службы.
Возвязая, яко подвигоположник, подвигом на враги варенье предславнее.
Дорогие последователи, вот здесь, вот в таком месте, это, конечно, нам очень трогательно, и что, слава Богу, когда такое, вот за длительный период, несколько десятков лет, такого не могло быть, что у нас будет церковь, совершаться божественная служба, литургия, и будет причастие, и все, что для православных христиан очень дорого.
Dear followers, we are very touched by this holy service and blessed ordination, as we never thought that it could be established in this place.
Бесплоден всякий дух гордыни, неверно злато, сталь хрупка, но крепок ясный мир святыни, сильна молящихся рука. И вот за то, что ты смиренна, что в чувстве детской простоты, в молчании сердца сокровенно, глагол Творца прияла ты. Тебе Он дал свое призвание, тебе Он светлый дал удел, хранить для мира достояние высоких жертв и чистых дел.
Раз. Раз, да? Спрятался. Теперь две. Я прям прячу за две руки. Раз, два, три, четыре, пять.
Non-contact work is a part of Systema, which sparks real interest and raises lots of questions. What can the impact be without striking? At Systema, it's based on knowledge about the psyche and the body dynamics, and also on your own body's mobility and precision.
Если ваши движения будут убедительными, да?
If your movements are convincing, he'll stop. You can see it every day in the metro. A person is coming near you, you just put out your hand and give him a sense of direction. He'll pass by. It's just a simple, logical
Так
phenomenon.
руку выставил, ты как бы дал ему направление, он мимо пойдет. Ну иди прямо на меня. Вот, видите? Он явно, это же простая логическая схема. Чего это нужно?
In fact, non-contact work is not really an instrument of attack, but a means of protection. Correct and precise movement which imitates a strike and then stops the opponent and warns him about the seriousness of one's intentions. It's like saying to him, don't ask for trouble.
Допустим, выскакивает человек с кинжалом.
Suppose that a man with a knife is jumping around you,
Вот такой нож. Да вы
and his
просто
knife
людей
is like
не
this.
с такими глазами,
You've never
да,
seen such men
еще
under the influence of drugs.
чего-нибудь, да? Вот.
If he sees you putting your hand
Ты вытянул
forward,
руку ему прямо в лицо,
he
он
can
увидел
stop.
угрозу, он может остановиться.
It
Это
can
тебя
save your
жизнь
life.
спасет.
Understand?
Овладеть этой техникой
It's impossible to master
нельзя.
this technique just
Движение
in
должно
theory.
быть отработано до
Movement has to be
мелочей.
mastered down to a
Только
fine
тогда
art,
оно
and
может
only
стать
then can it be
убедительным для
convincing for an
нападающего.
attacker.
Впрочем,
Though it
и
turns
этого
out
часто
it's not
бывает
enough at times.
недостаточно.
Я знаю,
My power of
как
conviction is the
человека
result of my
как
attainments.
толкнуть.
I know how to push someone,
Сколько ему
how much
силы
power I should
придать.
apply, what the next movement should be,
Следующее
and how it
движение,
works for you.
Оно будет работать на вас.
In other words, non-contact work should alternate with contact work?
Конечно.
That's it. If I strike someone hard, he won't attack again.
То
That's
следующий раз
psychology.
уже будет ходить. Психология.
После каждого занятия
After each class, there's a chance to discuss what took place. I was asked about my impression while I was shooting this interview.
стоящего за камерой.
Просто вспомнил эпизод из своего детства. Мы едем.
I've just recalled one episode from my childhood. I was a boy of 9. We were going somewhere with my father by train. I went to bed. Drunks and troublemakers came by and started to pull off the blanket. I was lying in the upper bunk, and my father was nearby. He came and raised his hand at them and said, "Hey, get out of here." And his motion was forceful, so they went away. So there's non-contact work for you. See?
Может быть, я не прав, мои мысли такие, что система — это...
Maybe I'm wrong, but in my opinion, Systema is a great path that takes you to the point where you don't have to fight at all. It's the path to a level where the power of the spirit, the body, and the psyche enables you to avoid fighting even when confronted. We may well be living in a world where no such experience persists. To overcome malice and aggression by humility and patience is key. Training has changed my mind and given me tranquility. It has made me self-assured, not presumptuous but confident. I can't say that it gave me love for everyone or indulgence toward all people. No, that wasn't part of it. But Systema gave me what helps me at work, to be more calm and patient with other people and their weaknesses. And that's very important. It's not over after the class, but it carries on beyond the gym and stays in our life. It works. I want to express my gratitude for this.
За что спасибо большое.
Держать удары нужно уметь обязательно, понимаете?
It's necessary to be able to take strikes. There are no heroes who only strike. Those are just fairy tales. One will always be struck, so it's essential to know how to recover and breathe properly. Correct breathing will restore your power. It's important to pray during a fight. Why was Russia called holy? And what are the differences between Orthodox fighting and non-Orthodox? First and foremost, when warriors were going to war, they were blessed, attended confession, and took communion. Second, warriors followed the testament to pray incessantly.
И Русь святая, она называлась еще почему? Потому что человек постоянно был в молитве, то есть он выполнял, Господь дал в Евангелии, что молитесь постоянно, да, вот, непрестанно. И никогда никто Россию не победит.
Russia will never fall. It will never happen because Russia was always formed as a military element, every aspect of it.
А если вот руки, так вот.
Сквозь огонь и любую разруху, когда сердце уж чует беду, поднимаются воины духа, и народ наш к победе ведут. А Россия их помнит и верит, Богородица путь их